It's the Art of Action Figures, looking at the latest figure in the SHF Berserk line, Casca, the Band of the Hawk. This is Casca's primary appearance from the Golden Age arc, where the Band of the Hawk is rising through the ranks, the social classes, and specifically this is her appearance from the battle against the Blue Whales mercenary group. I've been eagerly awaiting this figure ever since last year's stellar Band of the Hawk Guts. Casca is really the emotional anchor and core of the story. A really important character for Berserk fans. A character that has not gotten very much love in way of figures, the only 1/12 scale being Figma from at least 10 years ago, back when they still had fixed hinge wrist articulation, if you believe it, on import figures. A few interesting differences between how that figure was executed and this one. I think it's a smart choice for Tamashii to make this particular appearance. That battle is a real turning point for Casca's character development. It's really the first time she's vulnerable and has to rely on Guts, who she has been pretty critical and distrustful of for good reason. And there's 2 chapters literally called Casca 1, Casca 2, and that's where we learn her entire backstory, how she joined the Band of the Hawk, what she admires so much about Griffith, and exactly why she resents Guts so much and his endangerment of the group as a whole, but also for Griffith and his sort of utopian vision for the future, I guess, if you could call it that, where he's in charge. And especially because of how immediately and almost romantically Griffith latched onto Guts, whereas we learn in this chapter he was a little bit more ambivalent towards Casca, saving her life and saying, well, there's your life, do what you want with it. And she wants nothing more than to kind of earn that admiration back, and has done the legwork to do so, but Griffith is a strange beast, and we'll come to find out just how strange of a beast he is at a later date, maybe when that figure releases. But for now, let's talk about how Tamashii executed Band of the Hawk Casca. We'll cover everything, including the accessories, the articulation, the figure's aesthetics, and then I'll share some thoughts about what I think this means for the SHF Berserk line going forward. Let's get into it, starting with a quick tour of the packaging. On the front of the box, first we have your standard logo layout along the bottom, Bandai, Tamashii Nations, holographic Tamashii Nations quality sticker, designed by Tamashii Nations in Japan, Bandai Spirits made in China, Berserk, #1 fantasy comic presented by Miura Kentaro and Studio Gaga, SH FIGUARTS, Bandai Namco, Casca, the Band of the Hawk, cutout window showing the figure, some accessories, which mine's gone a bit tilted for some reason, nice yellow to orange gradient down the front, colored pencil illustration of Casca from this arc, and a hidden feature, this like embossed sword, has like a gloss printing on there, and that looks pretty cool. You can only see it when the light hits it. On the bottom, Bandai Spirits distribution info. This is the Japanese release. I don't know if there's a separate American release for this, but I imported this, so it's got the Japanese bandaispirits.co.jp, Japanese recycling info. The tray is made of PET. Up on the top, artwork of Casca and a figure photo in front of it. On the left, we have this like environmental figure photo where she's in some sort of dark, moody forest. Very nice. On the right side, a neutral looking figure photo. As someone who likes to display the figure boxes like this, I like that there are 2 vertical options that are both very nice looking. Gives me some variety that I can change it up as I see fit. And I'm guessing, do these match up in any way? No, they didn't attempt to do any kind of continuity between the 2, but they do appear to be in kind of a similar dark, woodsy environment. And then finally on the back, warning, choking hazard, small parts, not for children under 3 years, intended for ages 15 and up. Full spread of color promo photos, and in this orangey background, there's kind of a collage of illustrations from the manga, which is awesome. Sharp object, use adult or adult brain. Slice the tape. Oh, nice. I like that her cape is in the tray. It always bugs me when they tape the cape in a bag behind the tray. This background art insert, this is really cool. Great character art selection here. There's a whole lot of Guts and Griffith going on for this Casca figures, but we do have this choice expression, which is awesome, and this illustration, which is a really nice sort of neutral look for her. And then just, you know, happy friend times. It's just a sheet of cardboard. It's a little bit curled, but not creased, so that's good. It's a nice matte print. The print quality is very good. Looks more yellow in person than it does on my camera. Let's see if I can adjust to that. There we go. Yeah, it's quite orangey yellow. It kind of just blends in with that color palette on the box. And taking a look at the one from Band of the Hawk Guts, it's actually the same art print, just in a matte yellow ochre sort of color, whereas Guts is this like high gloss red. Quick peek at the instruction manual. Shows you how to swap the hands, attach the cloak, store her sword hilt, swap the faces, put the sword in her hand, swap out her helmet, and something going on with her glove. Just says, attention. The glove is removable, I guess. I'm not really sure why that is. Casca comes with 3 alternate faceplates. 2 of them are for the unmasked head. There's a neutral expression and a shouting expression. She has a swappable helmet head with a back hairpiece and a shouting face only, which admittedly she's probably in battle shouting if she's wearing her helmet. Definitely lacking expressions. I know it's not a particularly happy story, but a smiling face is always useful. They could have given her that like goofy, embarrassed face from the drawing that came in the box. She has 5 pairs of interchangeable hands, a pair of semi-relaxed hands with her fingers slightly spread apart, a pair of closed sword grip hands, a pair of splayed finger, open palm hands, a pair of relaxed hands with the fingers more together, and then a pair of fists. She has a full unsheathed sword, and then a separate hilt for storing in the sheath that's already attached to her belt. And finally, she has a red cloak with wire running all the way around the outside, including around the collar. The main accessory that I feel is a little bit lacking. She could use 1 or 2 more alternate expressions, a smiling face, and maybe a neutral helmet face, for example. Let's go ahead and get her out of the tray. Here's Casca with FIGUARTS Band of the Hawk Guts and Figma Skull Knight. Griffith Hawk of Light and Berserker Armor Guts. And rounding out the Berserk figures that I own, it's the SHF Isidro, Puck, Evil Era, and my favorite character in the whole thing, Shirke. SHF Yoda and Qui-Gon Jinn. As far as figure photography goes, there's going to be some awesome photos from people who collect lines like Mythic Legions that just have hordes and hordes of random knights in armor. I do not collect that line. I don't really collect any other fantasy lines. RIP SHF Lord of the Rings. But what I do collect that has quite a few knights is Star Wars, so we'll have some more appearances from Star Wars figures as we go. And the other line I collect that's full of soldiers, not necessarily medieval knights, but cut from the same mercenary cloth, SHF Dragon Ball. We've got Kui and Birder. And for your standard Goku-sized figure, SHF Bardock, and we'll round things out with SHF Chun-Li. For articulation, we will start with the cape on and then take it off to get a closer look. Head is on a dumbbell joint into the neck, and then a ball joint into the body. Looks up fairly well despite the short haircut and cape. Maybe 30 degrees. Going down. If you pull the cape down a little bit, it creates a little more room. She can tuck the chin and hit about 30 degrees looking down. Side to side. Very good tilt side to side. There's a lot of clearance in this little gap behind the ear. Yeah, actually, fairly good, fairly posable neck. Pleased with that. And they didn't do any weird stuff like have the peg go 90 degrees into the back of the hair. And this just works. So, happy with that. She doesn't have any like articulated fringe on the back like some figures do. She does on the helmet head, so maybe let's swap to that real quick. Unlike Guts, the little back plate here is not articulated separately, but pretty much equivalent range as without the helmet. And then looking down, you're still going to need to get the collar out of the way. Maybe a little bit less range going down, just due to the chin brace, chin strap. Basically equivalent side to side. And that hair moves around freely under there to close off any visible gaps. I'm going to take the cape off now. Without the cape, pretty much equivalent range, which is good. It means that the cape isn't really getting in the way. This is probably my least favorite part of how this figure is engineered. The shoulder armor is mounted on ball hinges that are embedded in the torso rather than on the arm. And it means they basically cannot follow the arm with a full range of motion. Compare that to Guts, and you can see you can get his arms in these extreme poses. The shoulder armor follows it no problem, and that's because this shoulder armor is not connected to his torso, but to his actual arm. There's a ball in here. So the shoulder armor just follows the arm as it moves, and it works so much better. I don't know if Casca's shoulders are too small for that design. I don't really see why they would be. That's definitely small enough to put a ball hinge of that width, but I don't know why they chose not to. I mean, I would even prefer these to be just glued to the arm right here than attached this way, because the way they're attached here, they not only don't move naturally with the arm at all, You can kind of get them to rest over the arm if you have the arm like relaxed and pushed up all the way and straight up and down. And these arms actually go up quite a bit. You can have it. This is another problem. It pops off constantly. As soon as you swing the arm forward or backwards, you can bring the arm forward maybe 10 degrees and have the armor follow it pretty well. It starts to drift away from it. You can slightly adjust it on the ball joint. But about here at like 30 degrees is where you really can't keep it together anymore. And if you want to bring her arms like to horizontal, there's just no place for this to go that looks good. You can kind of bring it up and over like this, but the angle of that peg means it just kind of floats there. And then same thing going back. It doesn't really track at all going back. Like once you're past here, you can already see it starting to misalign. I really don't like the way that's done. Like I said, if this ball hinge was on the arm, I think that's a much more ideal way to do it. Because as it is, these are more often than not in the way, not aligned properly. And the right one's okay, but the left one falls off if you breathe on it wrong. And it's pretty frustrating. So we're going to get them up and out of the way to look at the rest of the shoulder articulation. As I showed, the arms actually go way up. So there's probably some excess hinge here that they could have used the space for placing this ball hinge. They go all the way around. She has some kind of 360 butterfly joint in there. It swings out a little bit, so she can bring the arms together out in front pretty well and cross the hands pretty easily, which is what you need for a like two-handed sword pose. The best range is right about here where these straps connect. And she has another little piece of articulation at the forearm that further helps. Similar going back, a little more limited just due to the wider sculpt of the back plate. If these weren't here, she'd be able to raise her arms up over her head, but this gets in the way and just looks silly. And then, as I mentioned, it's a 360 butterfly joint, so you get lots of good roll. There's always going to be a little bit of effort to keep this lined up and attached. Double hinge elbow bends way past 90. Pretty well done elbow joint. It looks pretty good. And then she actually has a ball joint at the forearm, and that gives you a little bit of extra range in any direction you're trying to hit. So like when we were trying to cross the arms across the chest, or if you're trying to maximize the elbow range, you can squeeze a little bit more out using that glove articulation. Standard FIGUARTS ball hinge wrists, and her gloves are cut in kind of a U shape on either side. So there's angles where the range is increased. Although the hand just kind of slides over at other angles, so I'm not really sure they needed to do that. But the ball hinges work well enough. It does make swapping the hands pretty scary though, because they are very small, and I have found that these hands need heating up before attaching. This one's okay because it's been on the ball joint, but every time I've gone to swap the hands, I have heated them up first, just because they felt too tight to force onto the joint. Her torso is quite complicated, so let's go ahead and break it down. Her torso has this kind of wild dumbbell joint with a hinge in the middle that goes into the waist. You can see how the skirt is weirdly cut as well, and how the belt wraps around it. I thought at first that mine was kind of torn right here, but it's supposed to be like that, and I kind of wish it wasn't, because this frayed edge sticks out, and I don't really like seeing that. Dumbbell hinge without using the hips does let her bend at the waist forward about 30 degrees. Backward about 30 degrees as well, maybe a little less. And then tilt side to side, actually pretty good, similar 30 degrees or so. And then you can get some hula hoop in any direction. She swivels around. That sounds a little scary. The hips are FIGUARTS swivel hinge style. They don't have any kind of drop down, but I do need to talk about the thigh joint as well, because it's kind of unique and involved in how much range the hips get. It's a ball joint instead of a straight swivel. So it's similar articulation to Figma's 2B, where this ball joint can kind of increase the leg range in any direction a little bit. Going forward, the skirt doesn't really get in the way. The only thing is you want to be careful about pushing the fabric up into the hard edge of her armor. I've noticed it can leave like little lines on the fabric, so just be careful with that. But you get 90 degrees. Front to back split is no problem. And then side to side, out on her left is a little bit blocked by the sheath. Is it a sheath or a scabbard? Somebody tell me if you are an expert in medieval weapons. The hinge alone gets to about here, and then that ball joint lets her bring it maybe 5 or 10 degrees more. And so altogether, side to side split is pretty good. And then the thigh joint also helps with inverse hip range. The hips can already come together by themselves, but then add that ball joint in and you can bring them even further together. So that's good for crossing the legs one over the other. She has double hinge knee joints, and I mentioned in my review for Figma's A2, I talked a little bit about the double hinge knees and the sort of aesthetic compromise that they were willing to do for A2, but not really for 2B because of this like glossy thigh-high boot design. But it's interesting to see SHF do something that's in the middle, a double hinge knee with the like single hinge knee appearance. It looks pretty good from the back. They've also scooped a little bit out above the knee to help increase the bend. And the knee on its own gets to about here. And then once you involve the thigh joint, the knee bend goes to about there. Ultimately, it kind of amounts to 3 different ways to achieve the same range. Compare this angle to this angle. There's not a whole lot of difference. I think the biggest difference is the aesthetic of the knee joint. 2B has the sort of rounded Figma disc hinge, which does have its detractors, especially when looked at from the back, and there's just like a circle poking out of the back of her leg. But the trade-off is a more rounded shape when the knee is bent. A2 has a much more flush back of the knee. Still a decent knee-shaped silhouette and appearance from the front when bent, but at the cost of some additional segmentation from the front. And finally, Casca, in order to hide that double hinge block, they really had to make it a block. And you can see what I mean here. It's just like they went and sliced it right off straight on that edge. And it makes her knee look kind of like a weird rectangle. It's not bad. Knees are sometimes modeled as like boxes, but this is just a little bit too tall. And I think for that reason, it's maybe aesthetically my least favorite of the 3 when bent. I know the Figma disc hinge is maybe another contender for people's least favorite, but I think I like the rounded appearance here a little bit more. And finally, the ankle articulation is actually really good. The stirrups are on a separate floating piece, and they've actually cut the articulation really well so that you can get like a full range of motion pointing the foot down. Not a ton of range going up, but then of course she has a toe hinge. Nicely cut toe hinge. It also can actually point down a little bit. And like ridiculously good ankle rocker. So they did a great job with the ankles. A lot of points of articulation are really well done here, and it's just a shame that the shoulder armor is so undercooked. It kind of ruins the arms for me. The thigh articulation, while appreciated, does make the figure feel pretty unstable. One final thing, it's not really a point of articulation, but this sheath is on just like a floating belt that's a fairly soft plastic. It doesn't articulate really in any way. It kind of permanently hangs straight down her side like this and can look pretty goofy if you wanted her like running forward. This would naturally be rotated back. So I'm kind of disappointed there isn't any way to achieve that. And in fact, just by like posing this figure for photos, you can actually see this connection is starting to separate a little bit. And so it's making me nervous to continue posing the figure. I don't want to break this, but I'm worried it's going to happen just because of how thin that soft plastic is. And it's frustrating because there's so much to like about these Berserk figures, but it just feels like death by 1,000 cuts, which I guess is appropriate. And it's just little things like that that really hold these figures back from the popularity I think they deserve. For an expensive figure, you don't want to have to worry about parts of it tearing off just from using it. You don't want to have undercooked shoulder armor design getting in the way and falling off anytime you want to pose the character using their arms. And one more thing with all 3 of these is they're all pretty difficult to balance just given the designs. However, as always, Figma makes that easier to deal with by including a display stand with every figure and a native port on the back of each figure. If you collect SHF, you know that they hardly ever include a display stand. They, of course, sell Tamashii display stands separately, and that's their game. It's something they very frequently get criticized for, and for good reason. It's a very low-cost inclusion that just makes the quality of life for the collector that much better. Figma, Kyoto, and Mafex include a display stand with every figure, usually with multiple waist attachment parts. SHF is definitely the odd one out, and I typically don't bring it up just so that I don't sound like a broken record, but in cases like this where the base figure is just kind of unstable because of the thigh articulation and the very tiny feet, that's where I think it's worth pointing out. This stand is not included. I had to buy this separately, and I think it's a missed opportunity to do something like Figma did with the Deluxe Skull Knight, or maybe there was a pre-order bonus for Skull Knight. There was a special Berserk themed stand. That's pretty cool. I think SHF needs to get with the times on that. Like I said, it's not something I'll bring up in every SHF review until the end of time, because they're pretty clearly not going to do it. It's in their business model to sell those separately. But having themed display stands for the figures is a nice little value add that I don't think would cost very much. And it really makes me wonder how the Berserker Armor Guts might have been received if he included a really nice display stand and some specialty attachment for his sword. If they had given people a way to support the sword out of the box, I think it would have gone a long way to improving the reception of that figure, which would have gone a long way to improving the health of the Berserk line overall. Now, something about Berserk and a lot of manga/anime hand-drawn properties is that process isn't perfect, and appearances for characters change over time across media, and that's definitely true for Berserk. Casca's look evolves over the course of the manga. It's had anime adaptations with 3 very distinct art styles, and so unless Tamashii got access to some definitive character design sheets from Studio Gaga, there isn't really a fixed definitive point of reference. I think they kind of have to do their best approximation that will make the most people the most happy, and I think they've done a pretty good job here, but there is something about these faces that looks a little bit generic. I think for me, it maybe comes down to the nose just being kind of tiny. I think if it were a little bit larger, it would match my mind's eye a little bit better. However, there are some distinctive Casca features here. I am really happy to see they got this nice light shade of pink on her lips. That's something that is almost always consistent. Her lips are a lighter shade than her skin. Looking back at the initial prototype for this figure, they did darken her skin tone a little bit, which I really like. The 97 anime is a point of reference for a lot of people, where she had darker skin, and through other adaptations, it's subsequently gotten kind of lighter and lighter, and it's a little odd. And there's just so few brown-skinned main characters in anime and manga, and especially fantasy. So I'm glad that that's something they seem to have made corrections on, whether it was due to feedback from fans or the licensor. As for what this matches most closely, I think it's somewhere between Miura's most modern drawings of Casca, but also very, very close to the end of the Golden Age arc. There's a very distinct shift in Casca's appearance between Volume 5 and Volume 6 of the manga. And Miura even commented about struggling early on with drawing faces consistently and really settling on character designs as their characters started to develop more. And that makes perfect sense with Casca's character between volume 5 and 6. Those volumes cover the initial success of the Band of the Hawk, Griffith becoming a knight, the encounter with Zod, and the battle with the Blue Whale Knights that ends with Casca and Guts fighting off 100 mercenaries. And there's literally 2 chapters titled Casca 1 and Casca 2, I think in volume 6, where the majority of her backstory is developed, and she becomes a very three-dimensional character. Before that, she's kind of Griffith's stern lieutenant who doesn't like Guts. And the way she's drawn in those earlier parts kind of embodies that. She has just kind of a more severe expression, but in volume 6, Guts and Casca form the emotional bond that is like the core of the story for the rest of it. That's where I think her character design becomes the most consistent. Her features soften, her eyes shift downward on the face, her nose is shortened a little bit, and she makes a lot more comedic facial expressions through that part of the story. And that isn't represented by the figure at all, sadly. And I don't think that's acceptable, really. For the price that this figure sells for, it's the same price as Band of the Hawk Guts, and Casca is noticeably short on accessories, and it's especially noticeable in her faces, which just really lack range of expression. And that stinks. Swapping the face is quite easy. Pull the front bangs off. I have noticed there's definitely some black smudging happening under the bangs. That's a little worrisome. That might be something you can rub off, and the bangs, I guess, cover it. And man, you can really see just how like apple-shaped her head becomes. That's definitely a hallmark of more modern anime and manga. 80s and 90s manga was definitely more comfortable with more elongated face shapes. But nowadays it's kind of standard. I see the smudging happening on this face too. Nowadays, this apple shape is very common. I think the shouting expression is pretty good. Compared to the neutral face, the eyes are widened, the irises are a little smaller, the brow is furrowed, the mouth is opened with a good amount of depth. They still have her light pink lip shade there. They've really only done it on the lower lip, but that's a good artistic detail, because your lower lip is facing up, which is usually where the light comes from. Your upper lip is facing down and is usually in shadow. So the paint application there really is an intentional kind of 3D volume and lighting choice. Multiple colors inside the mouth, dark pink for the surroundings, a lighter pink for the tongue, and then white for the teeth. And looking at some of the battle-ready accessories, here's the sword and the helmet. The mask on the helmeted head is articulated. There's just 2 little pins on both sides. It can go up to about this far, and you can see the shouting face underneath. It's quite similar to the unmasked one. In fact, I might even say those could be tracings. The mask goes down to about here, covers the mouth, which means you can hide the shouting expression if you want. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. These splits are wide enough that you can still see the eyes through there, still get light through there to see the face overall. And it looks pretty cool. I, for one, think she really should have come with both helmets. This is the one from the battle with the Blue Whale Knights, but then she also has the arguably more iconic like commander helmet with the feather in the back from the Doldre castle raid. It's in that iconic cover where she's like posed all cute in front of Guts, and they should have included both. She's in the same armor when she's wearing both. The Figma Casca from many, many years ago had only the Doldre helmet with the feather in the back. Personally, I think that one looks a little cooler. This one's maybe more practical, but that one's definitely more graphic and stylized. She's wearing the same armor in both battles, other than the helmet, so I really think they should have included both, especially for the price of this figure. And I'm going to say that over and over again. This figure simply doesn't come with enough for its price. Then, from top to bottom, looking at the rest of the details, the hair is a nice matte black. I think the sculpt could definitely be sharper. She's drawn with much finer strands. They're a little bit thick and chunky here, and I think that's more of a just like shonen anime house style coming through from Tamashii than really trying to be accurate here. It's not bad. The finish is nice. It's just kind of solid matte black. It catches light really well. It is a little bit finer sculpt on the back. Her half cape is one of the best things about this figure. It's a really nice material. It's the same material as Band of the Hawk Guts, which is a really, really good 1/12 cape material. It has a really fine weave, and it feels really nice. It flows really naturally, like fabric. Interesting, they aren't exactly the same color. I'm guessing that's intentional. You could say they're both red, but Casca's veers a little bit more purple, while Guts a little bit more towards the orange side. But yeah, both are wonderful. Casca's, of course, is a half length, and her little commander medallion is in the center of the collar, whereas Guts is kind of over towards the shoulder. The medallion is nice, shiny gold with the Band of the Hawk symbol carved in there. The cape sits pretty well around the neck and over the shoulders. Originally, I was a little worried it would delete her neck a little too much and look a little too thick, but one trick I have figured out is because it has a wire around the collar, you can actually kind of turn it inside out first, and that will tuck the wire down, attach it like that, pull the cape down so it kind of folds down over the wire. And you can see where I'm going with this, hopefully. And the goal is you want it to look something like this, where it's flowing nicely over the shoulders. There's a good amount of her neck sticking up still. Attach the head, and there you go. Cape applied, neck retained, and that's the way it should look. It's not supposed to be like a heavy cloak that also functions like a scarf. It's just a cape. And yeah, that actually works surprisingly well. Like I mentioned, the cloth material they've used here is really nice. It doesn't feel gross and scratchy like the SHF Ahsoka. It just has, the right amount of stiffness for the scale, and it looks gorgeous. If there's one good thing I'll say repeatedly about this figure, it's just how good it looks. It's not just an attractive character design, but the colors are vibrant, and the different metallic and leathery and fabric finishes are really striking. So let's continue down to the armor. I gotta turn the lights down a little bit because it's just so reflective, but it's a gorgeous metallic silver. There's some dark, rusty, weathered wash between the different plates, and that's pretty consistent throughout. The cuirass is fairly hard plastic, and I know sometimes people don't like torsos to use hard plastic because it can block articulation, and it kind of does in this case. But typically, figure companies will use that harder plastic, usually ABS, when they want to preserve really sharp, high-resolution sculpt detail, like these sharp edges between the plates and these rivets. So I think it's a worthy choice in this case. I don't know how much a softer material would have helped articulation versus hurt the look. Always trade-offs to consider. When companies make design choices that have you scratching your head, don't just assume they're dumb or didn't check or whatever. I find it much more interesting to think of, okay, well, why would they choose to do this, knowing that I might have this complaint about it? And in this case, it doesn't really bother me. One more detail on her armor. She has these brown leather straps going over the shoulders, connected on the front with these little flower buttons. Are they connected on the back in some way? No, they just kind of feed under the back plate. But there you can see the back of the armor has the same level of detail. Next, let's talk about her orange shirt. The color combination of this pale orange and this magenta cape just really pops. The cape also like complements the tone on her lips, while the light orange complements the like bronzy and brown elements. It's a really, really smart color palette. I think it just looks awesome. The skirt is actually meant to be the bottom of a long sleeve shirt. So these are technically the same article of clothing. And man, those colors match perfectly between the fabric, skirt material, the sleeve material, and the elbow material. The color matching is really, really good. And the fabric skirt, I have mixed feelings about. I see why they did it. They really wanted to maximize the leg movement around this hard armor that extends over her hips, but it comes at a price of this cloth material here being pretty shapeless. It has the right silhouette for the most part. It has this half stitch up the side. She also has the brown shoulder straps. They do have some buckles on there that I think probably needed paint. I don't know why they didn't get any, but that was a concern with Guts as well. He's got the same sort of deal on his leg straps. She has smooth, semi-glossy, leathery gloves with these silver studs all around them. They're cut at an angle, which just, I don't know, gives them an interesting silhouette. Something that bugs me about SHF is the way they do these ball hinge wrists. They're oftentimes too tight. These were the default hands that came in the package, and I think I can get this on without heat. Yes, but all the other hands require heat, and you can see just how small that wrist peg is. You can see the strap for her sword hangs down the back, and that looks pretty good. The sheath or scabbard is really nice, black and gold. Other strap hangs down the front, gold detail on both ends. She has these thick leather stitched pants on both sides. And then finally, she has thigh-high brown leather like horse riding boots. They have white straps at the top, and they are ever so slightly darker and different texture than the pants and the gloves. So that's pretty cool. It's cool to see like a little variety in the materials like that. They look pretty good apart from when you bend the knee, as we discussed. The brown leather boots carry all the way down to her feet, where they're broken up into a couple layers. They look really nice. They flow into each other really well. She has these stirrups, which are a separate floating piece, which is nice because they don't block the articulation. And they're fairly soft. I wouldn't go flexing them a ton on purpose, but they're soft enough that if she's standing and then falls backwards, they're not going to shatter immediately. So that's good. Quick close-up of the sword. It's very pretty. It has this very ornate, fin-like crossguard design that's painted in a nice metallic gold. Also painted in gold, the pommel. I hope it's molded in the brown leathery color of the rest of the hilt, because it is one of those swords where the grip's a little tight and you kind of just have to force it onto the hand. You hear those clicks? That's the ridges on the hilt being forced through the hand. If you want a two-handed grip, you've really got to push it all the way up like that. And the blade is just a shiny metallic silver, as it should be, and it looks really good. And then for the one that she stores in the sheath, nothing too extraordinary. Same hilt design, slots into the sheath like so. Doesn't fall out on its own, but I'll say this, I've knocked it out quite a few times when posing. It's not held in there very tightly, so general recommendation, pose the figure and then place this as a finishing touch. Little action pose with the shouting expression and the sword, making the most out of the articulation to do a two-handed sword pose, a pretty unique one too, which I pulled from the manga. Using the wired cape to full effect, give it some more movement. And I think when you get a battle pose like this, the intensity of the face comes across better than if you were just looking at the face in isolation. And you can see what I'm talking about with these pauldrons. I guess in reality, they would probably be connected to the shoulder strap and this strap across the arm. But those straps would be leather or something so that this had a little bit of movement to them. So I don't really think the adherence to accuracy there is really warranted. One of those like ball hinge joints at the top of the bicep here and attach it like that. And then you'd have kind of this range where it can come away from the arm just a little bit and then pivot around. I think that would really be the ideal setup for this. In fact, I mentioned we'd see more Star Wars, and here's just kind of an old example from SH FIGUARTS, the Boba Fett. And you can see it has this like double hinge setup where there's one hinge, there's a second hinge, and then there's this ball peg, and his little shoulder armor attaches this way. And so it tracks whatever the arm's doing, and it just makes moving the arms nicer. It's not hanging out on the torso and getting in the way of the arm motion. And like, if you compare the size of that joint to Casca's shoulder, that shoulder hinge looks exactly the same width. It does look a little bit wider at the bottom where the shoulder pad mount is placed, but I think they could have carved some space out of the shoulder here and placed even a more simplistic version of this joint. I think there's plenty of room for it, and it would have made the figure a lot more fun to handle. So, unfortunate that they didn't go that route. And since they had to design a similar joint anyways and put it on the torso, I can't really think of a good reason why they didn't design it on the arm instead, other than the size. But quite honestly, if that was the limiter, they could have even increased the size of Casca's upper arms a little bit. Like, she's a broad-shouldered warrior. I think it would have worked, especially because it's going to be covered by this armor anyways. So it's a weird design decision, and I don't like it. So overall, I think Casca is merely a good figure, not great. It's a very, very safe, probably too safe figure in a line that I think needs risk to continue. My biggest gripes are the shoulder pad engineering and the lack of faceplates. And those two things together just suggest they didn't want to invest too much in this figure. This release just screams spot filler for the core SHF Berserk fans who are already into the line and don't have any other option. I just don't think there's anything exciting going on for anybody outside of that group. That fact, along with what we know is coming next, and the line's track record to this point, really has me doubting whether they plan to even continue this line after the Band of the Hawk Griffith. Let me explain what I mean. Tamashii really positioned this as a prestige line. They really put a lot of design effort and thought into the engineering, the aesthetic, the paint, the accessories. They've published multiple interviews with the designers, the sculptors, showing their work, showing how they still use like analog clay sculpting from the skeleton up, showing some of the reference material that they got from the licensor. And to me, this is like the closest Tamashii gets to something like InArt, where it's really a design showcase. Look how good we can make a figure. And I think for most people, their hit rate just wasn't high enough, especially given they priced the figures accordingly. We all know the Berserker Armor Guts came out with QC problems. It was a rough start to a line that had a lot of promise and attention and was positioning itself as like a premium, prestige, collectible line for SH FIGUARTS to like flex their talents with. Following from that was Griffith, Hawk of Light, which experimented with kind of a weird form factor that I don't think has ever been done in SHF before, including a very large static horse for him to sit on. And I don't know why Tamashii thought that was a good idea for a core group of collectors that like articulated figures, especially when articulated horses have been done before. I know a lot of people saw that as driving up the price for something that people didn't want in the first place, and as a result, that figure still hasn't sold through its stock at a lot of retailers. And to add insult to injury, Figma came out of nowhere and made this deluxe Skull Knight figure for very nearly the same price that has a fully articulated horse. Following that, we had the Heat of Passion Guts, which is much more well received. It streamlined the design of the original Guts, improved some of the annoying bits like the wrist joints. It was a little bit pricier because he had the swappable bent legs, but even still, like the first Guts, that one sold through its stock, which goes to show there was still strength in being able to sell the main character. What did Tamashii do next? It kind of seems like a series of failed growth experiments. First into side characters and then into monster characters. So with side characters, Isidro and Shirke, they're from a later part of the story which has not had a popular anime adaptation. Both of those figures have gone on deep clearance. That just tells me that was a failed experiment. And I think the lesson that Tamashii took from that is either the side characters aren't safe or this part of the story isn't safe. So we've heard not a peep about Serpico and Farnese, the other two characters of the Millennium Empire crew. If your Berserk line is gonna have legs, you've got to be able to find success in these two directions with side characters and monster characters. Otherwise, it's just knights. Then we have the next experiment with Zod in his human form. He's kind of like an ogre, I guess. This one was priced at, I think, 130. Unlike Isidro and Shirke, it hasn't gone on deep clearance, and honestly, it's the one figure from the line that I haven't picked up yet, mainly because of the price. Ultimately, there's been no follow-up on either of those paths, which makes me wonder if they concluded that, side characters and monster characters are dead ends, and then what do we see next? Here's, the main three trio from this story in their most iconic looks from their most iconic arc back to back to back. And if you know anything about long-running action figure lines, they never give people everything they want to complete their collection all at once. Rather than take any kind of risk that signals where they might go next, these are the safest, most popular designs that they probably feel obligated to get out. Since they pay for the license, they need to capitalize on the biggest possible sellers before they give it up. And it just feels like a final wave that doesn't really lead into anything else. Sure, maybe they could make Femto and the God Hand, but Figma just re-released all of theirs, and big and weird and expensive. FIGUARTS could make a slightly better, more modern version of it, but do they need to? Is it worth it? And really, the only way I think it could be better is if it was less expensive. Would it be? I certainly don't think their follow-up is going to be the rest of the Band of the Hawk. I think the only other one I'd want is Judo, because he's basically Link. Maybe you could make an argument Judo, Pippin, Rickert, and Corcus, the Band of the Hawk B team. Counter argument, you could say this clear pivot to the most popular part of the franchise is maybe an effort to jumpstart it a little bit, get the excitement going again. But then you look at Band of the Hawk Guts, which is an excellent figure, and it's on clearance. Maybe once Casca and Griffith are both out, people will feel more compelled to pick up all three, but then where does Tamashii go after that? This wave manages to build some momentum. Maybe they could do Monster Form Zod, but it's going to be expensive. They could jump around to Conviction Arc or Millennium Empire again. And I'll tell you what, this Casca figure, while very good looking and reasonably nice to articulate, does not feel special. It feels very much like spot filler in our capstone wave to make sure we got the most out of this license before we give it up. Those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think. This has been the Art of Action Figures. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.